Welcome back to Classic Politonomy, the show that brings together the experts and thought leaders in the political economy. It's part two of our discussion on income inequality, after we discussed on Monday some quite new research undertaken by Emergence Investments, detailing just how far behind South Africa is in terms of the pay gap when compared with the US, and also how executive pay as a percentage of a company's total wage bill can certainly be justified if a management team delivers returns that outstrip this. And we also stress the need for greater shareholder say on pay. To pick up on these themes tonight and unpack the rise of short-termism, it's a great pleasure to welcome Anne Crotty, senior columnist with the Sunday Times, Business Times, who's the rose amongst the thorns tonight. Good evening, Anne.
Hi, good evening.
And sitting across from me, I have Leon Ao, who's the Chief Operating Officer of Odgers Berndtson, which is an executive placement firm. Good evening, Leon.
Good evening.
And Neil Pretorius, CEO of DRD Gold. Great to have you back on the show, Neil.
Thank you, Michael. Hi, good evening.
Now, before we start, I caught up with economist Dr. Raj Abedian earlier in the week to discuss the issue of income inequality and how he believes EEE can be reformed to help narrow the gap. And I'd like to get your comments on what he proposes after this. Good evening, Dr. Abedian.
Good evening to you and the listeners.
Now, income inequality is the seeming ticking time bomb in our young democracy's hands. We're witnessing the longest ever strike in the platinum sector, and threats of new strikes in the manufacturing sector loom ominously. What do you make of the current debate around income inequality and how it's being handled by the various role players, both in business, labour and government?
Look, the issue of income inequality and its associated socio-political risk is possibly the most profound and pervasive risk that we face. And very importantly, this phenomenon of income inequality has got such a complex underpinning that try to have an elegant and quick solution is really not understanding the issues. At the same time, just because it's complex, it doesn't mean that you must just leave it and not do anything about it, because it's not self-correcting. Three elements of it are very urgent that we need to pay attention to. One is the quality of education and the quality of the skills. At the same time, the second and very importantly, we need to begin learning from our past 20 years of social engineering and experimentation, dealing with the issues of immediate access to resources. And one key element here is how we have managed or mismanaged the question of black economic empowerment. And that we have to do black economic empowerment, and the fact that we have to make that broad-based is, in my mind, non-negotiable, inevitable. Whether you look at it from an investment point of view, from political and social developmental point of view. If that is the case, then we need to re-engineer our black economic empowerment platform to make sure that immediately effective access to resources to upgrade the broad-based disadvantaged community is brought about. The structure of and the design of our BEE legislation and practice both at the moment is for the privileged and for the connected and for the urbanized, which means the sideline, the disconnected and the rural, non-urbanized or peri-urban has almost no access to the resources. So in that context, if we then put these various pieces together, my thinking is possibly we should think of depoliticizing this whole thing, but professionalizing it and redesigning it so that it has widespread and short-term access for all those who have historically and presently sidelined or disfranchised.
Well, that sounds, sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Abedian, but that sounds like quite a neat solution along the lines that would please noted economist Joseph Stiglitz, who is concerned particularly about rent-seeking elements and the role that those play in developing economies, in obstacles and barriers to reducing the kinds of income inequality and income mobility that we see in society, certainly because entrepreneurs need to be able to compete and play on an equal footing and have the ability to migrate and into a higher income bracket, that kind of income mobility can be trapped by rent-seeking or the kind of plutocracy that we developed around the EE currently.
Absolutely, and unless we re-engineer for upward mobility, not called upward mobility, a real objective and tangible and measurable upward mobility. By that I mean, unless we re-engineer so that our rural next generation, we can see them, they are going through a quality school that in 5 years' time, in 6 years' time, they will become almost independent, meaning they are now on self-propelling upward mobility. They don't need handout, they don't need political favor, they do not need political connectivity, but they can do it on their own steam and participate in the formal economy. And the formal economy can be in South Africa, or it can be in Southern Africa, or it can be in Mexico. I don't quite frankly care. As long as they are upwardly mobile, they will take care of themselves. So the BEE therefore has to be redesigned to give access to primarily youth and primarily this empowered segment of population, and not necessarily solely on racial ground or on connectivity and political network and profile.
How would we arrive at a sort of structural framework that would depoliticize the BEE in the way that it has planned out in the last 20 years?
Look, what I'm going to share with you, I started off by saying it's a complex issue, doesn't have an elegant solution. So in that context, I do not want to pretend that what I'm proposing is the silver bullet, as they call it. But certainly it's something that we have to hash it out, refine it. But consider for a moment that we establish a national fund that is managed by a absolute strict corporate governance principles, meaning a board of trustees who are multidisciplinary, peoples of integrity, people who understand, want to achieve strategically from a political economy point of view and from a social developmental point of view. These are not political hacks or right, left, or center. They are then underpinned by a professional team that's got sectoral experience. For example, if we look at our empowerment, there are 3 or 4 areas. We cannot be all things to everybody, but we can say there are 4 interventions that we want to focus on in the next 10 years, meaning quality education, quality health, basic health facilities, public health facilities, quality, for example, support for children, and let's say urban infrastructure. Those 4. We don't spread it widely. And those 4, we bring technical input as to why it should be those 4. And for a moment, I'm not arguing that I've got all the answers and those are all the 4 that I say. But having decided on the narrow focus, a relatively narrow focus of government will have the highest dividend for our population in the next 5-10 years, then we bring the right sectoral competencies and experience to manage each of those under the total governance trusteeship of the board of governance, or whatever we call them. Again, people who are properly mixed in terms of integrity, in terms of skills, in terms of commitment to what we want to achieve. And then the fund's resources will come from the BEE shares that companies would have to cede to the fund. It becomes a sovereign fund, a national sovereign fund, to redress our historic and present imbalances. Now just imagine the amount of resources that it will create and how much it will make the business to run easy. Then people don't have to look for either fronting or political connectivity. They know that there's a national fund, it's run, it's audited, and annual financial statements are out. And I would like to believe that businesses, for their own good business sake, for risk mitigation, they would love to pay or cede 10-15% of their shares to this fund, and we can make that terminal. This is a 25-year or 30-year or 20-year exercise. After that, the fund can actually go to the market and sell it. If it's listed entity, if it's not listed, it can sell it to whoever wants to buy it. Now, the amount of annual profit that will come into that fund will, I believe, will instantly enable all the public schools to have the best teachers, to have the base facilities, whether it's computerized networking or access to digital technologies, connectivity. Equally, it will make all public health facilities, at least from a financial point of view, able to be upgraded. And of course, it doesn't mean that Department of Health and Department of Education must stop what they're doing. They are doing the recurrent expenditure and the programmatic input to it. But this fund channels the resources to a broad base of people who are at the moment marginalized and will stay marginalized.
Well, I think it's a fascinating idea, and we'll have to see how it gains traction and how people add to the framework and the concept. Thank you so much, Dr. Iraj Abedian, Chief Executive of Pan-African Capital, for sharing your views with us here on Classic Politonomy.
Thank you very much.